We all know the Eagles have one of the best wide receiver combos in the NFL, but at the end of this upcoming season, there could be a question in regards to wide receiver 3. And one Eagles receiver was named the most surprising player at OTA. So could it be that Howie has found another hidden gem? We'll talk about that. And should the Eagles give a training camp tryout to a potential kick returner that has ties to Nick Sirianni? We'll get into all that and more. But welcome into A to Z Philly. I'm RB, and we're going to start it off with our boys, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Saw this stat this morning, and sometimes I just think about the Super Bowl, the run. Like, I know it's in the past and it's history now, but anybody else ever just like get excited thinking about that team, what they had to overcome, how they got there through the journey the year before the collapse, and getting to the Super Bowl and dominating the way they did. I'm so happy for Jalen and AJ, everything they've gone through, and just everybody. What a special group that was, and I hope they can run it back again. But Eagles are 43-9 in games where AJ and Jalen both start and finish since 2022. That's an incredible win percentage, 83%. Obviously not the only factors, but pretty big ones for sure. When those guys play, this team is significantly better. So don't worry about who's saying this and that about what Jalen's role is and AJ. Doesn't matter. These guys are special. Speaking of special, let's talk about a guy who was special in his last performance in the NFL. 2 years ago to the date that he tore his ACL in a jet ski accident, Nyheim Hines is looking for a chance to play in his first NFL game since 2022 when he returned 2 kicks for touchdowns in the same game for Buffalo. Hines believes his knee is finally ready for a return and is looking for a new training camp home, where then ESP responds and says Eagles have an opening at kick returner, and Hines has a 3-year history with Nick Sirianni. Would not be any guaranteed money, but might be worth Eagles giving him a shot at training camp. So should the Birds bring in Nyheim Hines? To me, it doesn't hurt. Why not? Throw out some flyers. I know at one point, Britton Covey was essentially a meme, but that guy was pretty damn good at his job. And, all the guys, whether it was Gainwell or, Britton Covey, whoever was back there, those guys played an important role. But that's why the Eagles went out and got a return specialist. That's what they call him, quote unquote, Avery Williams. So we'll see what that guy has to offer. Again, it can be very finicky year to year. So would I mind the Eagles bringing in Nyheim Hines to see if he has anything left and if he's actually healthy? Sure, why not, right? Connections, relationships are everything. And if Sirianni is comfortable with him, why not? Why not give him a shot? But we will see what happens there. Glad to see him trying to make a comeback in the NFL. Now let's talk about one guy who could significantly have a comeback in his career and maybe, just maybe, could be a hidden gem for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if we look at the depth chart, obviously the offense is stacked. They brought essentially everybody back. And we know AJ and Devontae are the guys. They're not going anywhere. They're locked up for years to come. But Jahan Dotson, third wide receiver on the team, Jahan Dotson was very, very good in his role last year. And it takes a lot to kind of get off that ego and that high horse and say, you know what? I was a former first-round pick. Didn't really work out. I got traded to Philly. Let me fulfill my role, right? He didn't have a lot of volume of catches and yards, etc., but he made some pretty big plays. The catch against the Jags, I think it was 36 yards last year. He had the big catch in the Super Bowl. He fulfilled his role, never complained, never asked for more catches, anything. He just was right behind AJ and Devontae learning, and he did a damn good job. The problem is that he did good, everybody else did good, and if this team has another big run this year, well, somebody might be looking for a receiver, and Jahan Dotson might get paid. So let's say that that is the case. And if we go over to the contracts here and we look at Jahan Dotson, right? I mean, he's only making $1.4 million this year. Next year, he'll be an unrestricted free agent. So it's very likely that based on the money that is tied up in the Eagles receiver room, Howie's either going to try to draft one or sign one or, find some type of hidden gem. And ESPN put out an article last week with the most surprising players at OTAs around the NFL. And to many surprises, Danny Gray was listed as the guy for Philadelphia. So who the heck is Danny Gray? Well, let's talk about him. So he's 26 years old. He's a former third-round pick of the San Francisco 49ers back in 2022. and he has 4.33 speed, which was used to stretch the field and accelerate past defenders on catches over the middle. Gray dealt with some injuries and tallied just one reception during his time in San Francisco. So he had decent college numbers. He went to SMU. He's a smaller guy, 6 foot. Do they have his weight here? 200 pounds. So 6 foot, 200 pounds. Probably more of a slot receiver, if anything, or maybe a deep threat, here and there type of guy. And also a guy who can contribute probably on special teams as well. He was waived by the Niners back in August, and he signed with the Eagles practice squad days later. Philly has one of the top receiving duos in AJ and Devontae, but there are some roster spots for guys lower on the depth chart like Ainias Smith, Avery Williams, and Terrace Marshall. And to me, that is really what it comes down to, right? We look at Danny Gray, and like we just said, he hasn't really had an opportunity at all. He's been a practice squad guy. But you can also look at the Niners, who have had their, groups of wide receivers and their guys who have been at the top of the NFL. So they didn't really need anybody else, right? And this is what Howie does. He scours the practice squads and all that, and he just picks guys up on flyers and tries them out. So could Danny Gray emerge as the guy? Maybe. But in my opinion, the Eagles actually have a pretty good group to select from. The guy they just talked about, Terrace Marshall, right? Eagles picked him up last year. Former second-round pick out of LSU, played alongside some really good receivers, and I liked what this guy did. He never had a great amount of production, but he was also playing in Carolina where, they just haven't had a good group at all for the last several years. So even back in 22, he had 490 yards and a touchdown. I like Terrace Marshall. He's a bit of a bigger receiver, can probably go up for some contested catches better than a guy like Danny Gray. And he's only 25 years old, so I like Terrace Marshall. We still are waiting to see what's going to happen with Ainias Smith. He is listed here as 5'9", 176. I didn't even know he was that small, but it just doesn't really look that good for the former 5th-round pick. But how about a guy like Johnny Wilson, who we saw get inserted a lot last year in the red zone, right? Very big target, almost feels like more of a backup tight end than a receiver, and he's 6'6", 228. So all of these guys are going to be in the mix. I do think it is a little bit interesting that the NFL writers at ESPN put Danny Gray's name on the list. Like, it's not like everybody was going 1,000 miles per hour at OTAs, but some of these younger guys trying to prove themselves were definitely going to be on the top of their game. So the fact that they chose him out of everybody is certainly interesting. And if we go over here and look at his high school scouting report, there's definitely some interesting things in here for Danny Gray. Athletic receiver with good height and a lean build, can add some bulk to his frame to better transition to P5 level football. A true speedster with impressive track resume from high school. This guy ran a lot of track, apparently won a lot of awards. It says he was one of the fastest JUCO wideouts in the country for the 2020 cycle with all conference potential at the P5 level. He is a field stretcher in vertical game who gets quickly on top of DBs, and he shows impressive acceleration and dangerous long speed. Intriguing return game option. So we just talked about Nyheim Hines. Could Danny Gray be another name that could potentially get some reps there and, see what he can do? I feel like we get to this point every year in the Eagles season where, their top 2 guys, AJ and Devontae, are the guys, and then they might only have like 1 or 2 other receivers on the roster, and one of them usually ends up just being a return guy anyway. So it's always good to have depth. Having more options is always a good issue, as they say, but the question is, can one of these guys emerge and be the player that they need them to be? If not, maybe Howie just goes into the draft next year in the first couple of rounds and selects a receiver. Who knows? But they have a lot of different ways they can treat this. The good thing about a guy like Danny Gray is he's not going to cost you pretty much any money this year. So obviously this is going to be a long shot, but this is the type of thing we talk about in the middle of the summer when nothing's going on. We are a few weeks away from Eagles training camp, and I can't wait to see how that plays out. But the Eagles are set up for a really special season, and whoever it is going to be in the future, whether it's Jahan Dotson coming back or a draft pick after this year, or a guy like Danny Gray or Terrace Marshall, the Eagles just continue to find ways to build continuously year over year, right? These are the kinds of things that Howie Roseman is already locking in on that is going to set this team up for future success, right? Not just worrying about the now, but the future as well. They're getting younger, they're building out, and so forth. So we will see what happens. What do you think about Danny Gray? Who do you think should end up being the Eagles' third wide receiver if Jahan Dotson ends up leaving? What do you think Jahan Dotson will do? Will he have an even better season this year? Give me your thoughts down below in the comments section. And as always, appreciate everybody for tapping in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That being said, I will catch you on the next one.